Hello and welcome everybody here today to our 30-second free holding space for self and others webinar series. It's lovely to have you here, whether you're here with us live and in person or whether you're watching the recording later on. It's really great to have your company in this wonderful webinar that we have today. My name's Jackie Short. I'm the Director of Sydney Centre for Creative Change, and I'm really happy to welcome you here to this webinar today, which is on how to parent 21st century girls with the wonderful Lisa Jayne, who's here with us. I know Lisa through a couple of different networks, including a family connection. So really excited, Lisa, that you can be with us and join us today. So welcome one and all. I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands that I come to you from today, the Eora people of the Gadigal Nation, and pay our collective respects to Indigenous elders past, present and emerging. Welcome one and all to this first in our webinar series again this year. I'm going to share my screen and just do some introductions before we start. As I've mentioned, this is today an opportunity to look at how to parent 21st century girls. Lisa Jayne is an educator, speaker and author. Her professional interest lies in making it easier for mothers to raise courageous, self-empowered 21st century daughters. Her book, The Emotionally Powerful Mother, provides 5 vital keys for a transformative mother-daughter relationship. Lisa facilitates online masterclasses, workshops and retreats for mothers and daughters, and offers a 5-week immersive program. With 2 daughters of her own, Lisa's work is both practical and current and teaches emotional skills for life. So I'd like to introduce you now to Lisa for this presentation. Welcome, Lisa. Great to have you here.
Thank you very much, Jackie. It's lovely to be here, and hello, everyone. So, how to parent 21st century girls. Are you ready for the ride? Because truthfully, like, how do we do that? And I work with so many women that are pulling their hair out, and they have a lot of information, and smart women, business women, women that achieve all sorts of things in every other area of their life. And then they come back home and they have these daughters that they cannot do anything with. And it's actually becoming a little bit of a pandemic, I think, at the moment, when you hear what's happening to teenage girls. We've got cutting, depression, anxiety. They want to change their identity. They want to have piercings. They're sneaking out at night. They're locking themselves in their bedroom and they won't come out of their bedroom. They're online. They're addicted to devices. Like, our culture really has a massive influence on girls and boys, like really all of us, to be honest. But when it comes to our teenage daughters, a lot of mums, because we also are facing this change in our society, where as older women, we know how important it is to empower the girls. We know that that's something that is really, really, really crucial if we want to have a really well-balanced world, and if we don't want to see some of the history repeating itself in the future. And so we have all the time in the background this thing going on. It's like, yeah, we've got to empower these girls, and we're trying to. Like, I've had mums that have come to me and said, you know, I've given my daughter a voice. Like, since she was a child, I've taught her how to speak up and stand in her truth. And then she gets to 11 and she tells me where to go. So she has a voice, all right. And I actually don't know what to do anymore, because I've raised her to this point. And now what do I do? Where do I go? And I have other mums that are like, you know, I've sent her to courses. I've done everything that I knew I had to do to empower her. And now she's a teenager. She started cutting, you know, and she won't let me into her life. I can't even talk to her. I don't even have a relationship with her. And that's really terrifying for a parent, to see your child. And she described it as, I'm watching my daughter and it's like a train that's just barreling down the tracks, moving towards this place where it's just about to be derailed and I can't do anything to stop it. And these are really quite unprecedented times because of technology, because of COVID, because of the access that we have to information. So our girls can diagnose themselves. They can tell you that they have BPD. And like, my daughter's told me a lot of these lovely diagnoses. I can't even mention some of them, right? I can't even mention some of them. But she can tell me what they all are and what they all do. So they know the information. They have access to this. They talk about it with their friendship groups online. They're talking to people from overseas. So this is really, we are in unprecedented times. And even if our parents did a good job of bringing us up, and it's no offense to our parents, but often they did the best they could, but they didn't have a lot of tools either. Like, I can remember not feeling very emotionally supported. It was like I felt that there was no space for me to be me. And yet they were doing what they were raised in their culture to do. And we grew up sort of okay. But now there's all this other pressure of what life is like in the 21st century. So I'm going to suggest that unprecedented times calls for an unprecedented response. Maybe that's not exactly true, because really this response has existed before in the past, quite a while ago, before we actually moved into this industrial world that we've become a part of. It's a response that's based on our inner knowing, on our innate wisdom, which every single one of us on the planet has. It's a response that's based on what we feel as a mother, because we are incredibly and intrinsically connected to our child. And that response, I think, is perhaps the only solution that's really going to work in these times. Because I don't know about you ladies, I mean, I'm sure that you've all been working with people and you can see that there's a wealth of information, right? We know a lot of stuff. We can access information at 1 a.m. in the morning. If we're freaking out about our daughter, we can find the information. But the information hasn't necessarily helped our society become very well. Like, when I look out, I actually see more mental health and emotional health issues than what there were maybe 10 or 15 years ago. So for me, I think the information is handy, but I actually think we need to step into another paradigm. We need to even take it further, and we need to come back to what's natural rather than what's normal. I think what's normal is we've been taught to sort of fix things, to get on with things, to try and make things work, and not necessarily to acknowledge the feelings or really work with what we're feeling. We've been taught that we have to do things, we have to achieve things, that there's a list on our table that we've got to get through, we've got to make that happen. That's the way that we've been taught, many of us. It's a very head-based world that we're in. It's a world of analysis and a world of fear, because in the head you've got this is what the head does. It creates projections of the future and brings in the memories of the past, and all of that sits in here. And if I stay in this, I can feel very anxious and very out of control, and I'm very separate from who I really am, the embodiment of all of me, my heart, my true center. And so for me, these times, they're really calling us. They're calling us to integrate all of ourselves. Everything that maybe we've left behind because we might have been ashamed, or because it was too hard, or it just felt really, really terrifying to have to deal with it. I believe that we're being called to integrate all of that now, so that in this moment we can be all of who we are. There's nothing separate. There's nothing that we've pushed away because we wanted to resist or deny, or we can't feel it anymore. Right now, right here, we're being called to be completely emotionally present. And I feel that that's the solution to raising 21st century girls. It has been done before. We were once a species that did operate through natural response to the environment. In fact, every living thing does that, right? Every living thing has a natural response to the environment. They feel, they have a response, and they adapt and they evolve, except human beings. We don't necessarily have a feeling response and then go, oh, that's telling me something. I might adapt or I might evolve. We generally don't do that. We generally deny, resist, or medicate, right? We just don't go, hey, this could be a good thing. What can I learn from this? What did I do that actually created this feeling within me? Where did I not take emotional responsibility? What could I do better? Like, we generally, not our fault, right? I actually feel that's because we don't really get an emotion education. And when I say emotion education, I'm not talking information. Like, we can look up 52 different emotions. We can look up how our emotions work. We can look up how they interact with our mind. We can have so much information. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the feeling experience of understanding my emotional consciousness. I'm talking about the knowing of how my emotional world works. And that actually can't be put in a textbook because it's an experience. Like, feelings are not thinkings. I have a lot of thinkings, but actually feeling my feelings and really understanding the experience of what my emotions are bringing to me and manifesting in any moment, that's something that I have to be in. That is a state of being. And that really can't be taught. I can't Google that. People can show me the way, but it's really through my ownership of that experience that I get to understand it. I wrote a book, The Emotionally Powerful Mother. And one of the things, because I've been working with emotions for some reason, probably actually since I was a kid, to be honest, because I can even remember as a teenager being so like passionate about emotions and helping my friends with their emotions. And, you know, like I've always just been so intrigued by the way emotions work, which is quite ironic really, because I was really doing all my feelings in my head. You know, I could have told you I was emotional, but I would have a feeling and then I'd analyze it and I'd fix it and then I'd jump in a dynamic to deal with it. I never actually really felt my body and felt the experience and moved with it because I wasn't taught that. But for some reason, I was really like intrigued by this. And then as a teacher, I saw how kids that hadn't been heard came to school, and often they might have had really, you know, very disruptive family lives. And yet they came to school, and at 9 o'clock, they're taught to, like, you know, shut down, sit down, be quiet and learn. And I don't know about you, but like when I've had really emotionally turbulent times, there's no way I could even sit on a webinar. Like, I can't learn. I'm just like too disturbed to focus. And yet we expect that of our children. And for me, that was just such this massive big thing missing in our education system. And so when I wrote this book, and like even after all of that time and working with women, what I learned became part of my experience. It became part of what I knew to be true. But then actually trying to find a way to write it and put it into a concept so it fitted in a little box so that I could help explain it, that took me absolutely years to do. And I remember sitting at my desk, and it's like, how can I explain a feeling? How can I put a feeling into a thinking? And so I started drawing these diagrams, and like, I don't fancy myself as much of an artist. Like, I do love being creative, but I thought it doesn't really matter what it looks like. So I've ended up drawing these, and you'll see it. There's a free download of the 11 life lessons. And I've used stick figures essentially. But what I discovered was that I could actually give the stick figures like an expression on their stick figure face that really represented a feeling. So for some strange reason, these really simple diagrams helped me explain what I needed to explain. And it was almost like through them, I was able to find the words to bring it back into a dialogue that helped me express what I felt like I wanted to express about emotion. So back to our emotional world and how to parent 21st century girls. You can see the dilemma that we have. We as parents have an emotional reaction to what's happening. So we have possibly, you know, work issues, partner issues, and then we have these daughters and we have this emotional reaction, and all of that is going on. And through that, we are trying to take an action. Through that, we are trying to decide on a clear pathway forward. So we're actually operating from foundations that really aren't optimal for an optimal solution. That's not our fault, right? This is like, we just haven't been taught what to do with all of this. So for me, I really want to encourage people to start thinking that we might do emotion in a way that's normal for everybody. We might do life in a way that's normal for everybody. But I like to suggest that it's actually not natural, that the way that we often, or we're taught by our default position, and certainly I lived for a lot of my life, that way that I was taught was very normal, but it actually wasn't natural. It required me to look outside of myself to deal with anything I felt. It required me to suppress or deny and shut down big parts of my emotional world in order that I could get on and do what I needed to do. So shut down, in fact, that it wasn't until I was 37 that I actually really started to feel. So I had a great understanding intellectually of emotions and feelings, and I knew what was wrong with me. I could tell you my childhood wound. Like, I understood why I did what I did, but I still didn't know why those patterns kept showing up. And that was because the next level of understanding, the emotional consciousness that I needed to move into, I hadn't had that experience yet. So at 37, I had an awakening, if you like. And for me, I all of a sudden realized how I was very shut down emotionally, which surprised me so much. But it was like, I actually really was. And I thought I had to start to get to know my emotions. I had to stop and I had to really feel into my feelings. And I had a lot of trouble describing them. Even now, sometimes it's like, oh, what is that feeling? What's really going on in me? You know, and that's part of the process, right? It's like, this is the curiosity of what is it that's coming up in my body now to be healed? What is it that's being brought to my attention that I need to pay attention to? So for me, it wasn't until 37 that I actually started to realize that I hadn't been connected to my emotional world, that I had lived fairly separate to what I really felt. And when I started to integrate that into my life, I then noticed how so many things changed. I started to feel naturally what I needed to do next. Over time, I became very aware of the senses that I had within me that were indicating to me that something was wrong. And I started to look at that. I started to pay attention. My feelings would always give me little hints. And it would be as simple as something like, I would wake up the next day feeling a little bit, like something's not quite right. And when I actually sat with that, I would discover that the day before, I didn't end a phone call well, and I needed to address that. So it's very practical. It's very practical. And for me, that inward looking state, that actually owning all of how I felt and being in this moment made such a big difference to the way I lived. I lived a different state of being. It was much more intuitive, and it came into more of a flow. And what this has to do with raising a 21st century girl is that if a mother, rather than trying to fix and change the external world and drag her daughters to places to make her better, if a mother had the emotional capacity to actually sit in presence with her daughter and really hear her daughter and create a space for her daughter to be exactly who she is in this moment, then a lot of healing takes place. And I'm sure, like many of you, I know you're in the healthcare field and you've probably experienced this yourself. Often it's just being there for that person, like being really present for that person. And that space, I think, is our emotional advantage as a mother. Because if you think of it, girls are going out. What's coming back to them all the time is, you're not good enough, you're not skinny enough, you're not beautiful enough, you're not wealthy enough, you don't have this particular bag, your nails aren't long enough, your eyelashes aren't long enough, like you might have this illness, you need to do this. This is what they are faced with. And if they're on tech the majority of their days, which, like, let's face it, most of them are, and that in itself is a major issue. But that's like addiction, right? You can't walk up and just stop someone from drinking. They have to really want to be doing that for themselves. So that leaves the mum in a tricky situation. Being able to create an emotionally safe harbour for our daughters, where they feel connected, where they feel heard, and where they feel safe, that's very enticing. So for me, that's where I start. I start suggesting to mums that let's think about how we are in relationship with our girls, because there is so much untapped potential in the mother-daughter relationship. What happens in the mother-daughter relationship is that the mothers get a chance to heal as well. And not only is the mother healing, but if you've heard or read anything about the cross-generational patterns that come through and actually manifest in dynamics in our lives, you know that my healing actually can go back generations. things that have been carried through generation after generation after generation, when I stand and look at it, I can heal that. And I'm not passing that on to my daughter. The legacy I'm leaving for her is that she doesn't have to deal with those patterns that are coming through her subconscious. So I decided not so long ago that if I wanted to help teenage girls and girls that are moving into their puberty years, that I had to help the mums. I had to help the mums see that the more that they were able to sit in their center and come into their true power, like who they really are in this moment, without, like projecting something or wanting something more or wishing that was different. But if they could just come into that space, that they actually created a cohesion with their daughter. And that cohesion is neurological, right? Like our daughter, when she's born, the first thing that she does is see our eyes, she sees our mouth, she sees our little face going, it's okay. Like we are the soother of that little baby. And so that's all in her, the way she operates in her physiological development. That's still there, even though she's a teenager and even though she may be rejecting us, that is still there. So this is this advantage that we have when we come into this cohesion. She really by default wants to be soothed by us. By default, she wants to be connected to us. And the more that I as a mother can connect to myself and be here for me, then I can be here for her and just be emotionally present. I don't require anything of her. I don't require her to be anything different than what she is. And that allows her to breathe. I can feel safe. And when she does that, she can actually move. She can actually develop. She can actually grow. And I refer to this as the emerging process, right? Because I think when I talk about, if you have a look at the mini book that you can download, I talk about the way that we're taught to deal with emotion. So for me, it was like if I felt an emotion, because it's uncomfortable and I just didn't know what to do with it, I took it straight into my head and then I'd try to analyze it and I'd blame somebody, I'd persecute someone, or I'd want someone to change so that I could feel better. And all of a sudden I created a dynamic. So my dynamic was, generally codependent relationship, like with my first husband, it was like, he had to fix me by making me feel loved because I feel insecure at the moment. And so then I had to try and fix him because he was an alcoholic and I felt powerless. And over time, like you'd have these loops where the love was withdrawn and then given back, and the love was withdrawn and given back. And that on again, off again love thing, this pattern happens with our children. When we're not aware of the fact that we have an emotional reaction to something, we can very easily jump into the head and then we create that dynamic. We need our child to be something different. The child feels that they're not good enough. So the child then tries to be what they need to be in order to get our love and our approval. And so they're learning people-pleasing behavior very, very early in life. They're learning that dynamic of relation very, very early in life. And as a parent, I used to feel so frustrated because I was always in these dynamics. I've got twin boys that are 29, right? And I don't know, like boys are challenging when they're young, full stop, most boys. And having two of them at the same time, like I honestly felt like I was just surviving. And I remember thinking like the amount of times that I would be sitting on the phone trying to ring somebody, like anybody, to help me because I just felt like I couldn't cut, like I just didn't know what to do with these boys. I felt so powerless. They would just do things. Like we had a new house and I'd come home one day and here's one of them with a screwdriver, like screwing this screwdriver into the wall. And I'm thinking, what could possess you to think that this is okay? Right? And I just like, so powerless. I just felt so powerless. And emotionally, I didn't understand that what was that, like there was this thing that happened, the emotional reaction, which I wasn't dealing with, translated into this feeling of frustration and anger, or what are you doing? I could never accept that this is what's, this is being done because boys need to experience things. They need to experience the whole lot of it. They need to feel what it feels like to, screw something into the wall. They need to feel what it feels like to have mum coming home going, what are you doing? Like that whole process for them was like the experience of the moment. If someone had told me that before, and if I'd been able to actually understand my emotional reaction, I think the whole thing would have been different, but hey, that's what I've learned now, right? If someone had said to me, when you come home and you see your son screwing this thing in the wall, you're going to feel not good enough as a mum. And that's actually going to activate your unmet emotional need of, I'm not good enough, I'm not a good mum. And because that emotional need is going to be activated, you are going to think that it's because of your son's behavior. And so you are going to punish him and you are going to want him to be something different. But actually, none of that's true. What is true is that you have an emotional reaction, which is only your responsibility to deal with. And if you deal with that, you can come home and you can say, oh, okay, there's something that I haven't guided my son to do. Perhaps I haven't taught him that there's a perfectly usable shed out the back with nails and hammers and things. Perhaps he needed to connect with me more. Like there were so many reasons that he could have been displaying that behavior in that moment that I did not have the capacity to see, investigate, or just sit and be with. So I have learned that the way I roll emotionally is so integral to how my 15-year-old rolls. Not only if I can sit in emotional presence can I create this cohesion with her, but the trust deepens. So I am in relationship with her. I'm not in relationship to who I want her to be. I'm not in relationship to this being that I want to look a certain way or behave a certain way or get good grades. I'm not in relationship with those projections of who she should be. I'm not in relationship with who she was a year and a half ago. You know, when she actually felt quite depressed because her dad left and she was going through a really tough time. I'm not in relationship with that person. I'm in relationship with who she is right here and now when she walks into the room. And that could be anything, actually. Like she's a teenager, right? So it could be like, I just want to kill myself. Or it could be, I'm having a great day. Like you just never know. But the thing is, I can be there in that moment with her. And I'm not bringing my fears or my expectations or my judgments or my wounds from my childhood and my relationship with my mum. I'm not bringing them into this moment with her, but instead we have this beautiful space where we're on this journey together. And like I keep telling her, we're in an emerging process. You know, we're not in that repetitive cycle. We're not doing that dynamic in this. And I know the feeling. I know if I can get into that dynamic. Like the other day, she shared something with me and I recognized in my body, it made me feel powerless. Like as soon as she said, I thought, oh my God, I feel powerless. I feel like, oh, what am I going to do about this? You know, and I just said to her, when you shared that with me, I felt really powerless. I felt like everything's getting out of control and I have to do something about this. And I felt this overwhelming feeling of powerlessness. And she said to me, I get why you'd feel that, Mum. And just me being able to speak that to her and for her to be able to come back and appreciate where I'm at, we could move into the next moment, which was okay. So how, and I said to her, I really don't know how to deal with this. You know, this is something that I haven't been in before. And I said, you're going to have to let me go away and really sit with this. So what I recognized is that I didn't used to work like that before. If I felt powerless, I would react and I would blame someone else or want something to change so that I felt better. Sometimes I would actually go and I would have an interaction with somebody else completely different that wasn't a healthy interaction. I might, you know, if I was a boss, I might snap at one of my staff. And that snapping, that activation of, you know, I'm the most powerful person here, that would make me feel a sense of, oh, okay, I'm empowered again. So I began to see all these dynamics that I created simply because I had a feeling and I hadn't really been taught how to sit in that feeling. So I fully believe that the way, and I keep saying this because I can't see any other ways, right? Like we've got a lot of ways. We've got like trillions and trillions of ways to raise a 21st century girl. I haven't actually seen a lot of them working apart from this process. And I know that there's other people that are talking about this now. And I really think this stepping into this emerging process with your daughter, seeing it as a shared journey, you know, because for mums, so your daughter becomes this teenager, and for a lot of mums, it activates this fear. They have a fear that they're losing their daughter. Their daughter starts shutting the door. So all of a sudden they feel rejected, they feel hurt, they feel left out, they feel disconnected. All the old dynamics that maybe they had with their daughter that made them feel worthy and fulfilled, they've all just changed. So while the daughter is emerging into this beautiful, blossoming teenager to woman, the mother is not emerging, she's reacting. So imagine if the mother was able to use this as an opportunity to start to heal herself and heal those wounds. And as she came into the emerging process with her daughter, they both grew. They both learned how to express their emotions together. The mother started to role model what emotional responsibility looks like. So the daughter hears the mother working through her own emotional process. The daughter sees the mum stepping back into her power. The daughter just learns how to speak when the mum says things like, oh, when you did that, that landed on me as a feeling. You know, can I share with you? Like, let's sit and have a chat about this. So she's learning these ways of communicating what's going on in her inner world so that she can come to some sort of solution, or at least create a movement towards a solution without having to use conflict. Because often what happens in these mother-daughter relationships when the daughter hits teenagehood is that conflict happens because of this lack of understanding of where we are emotionally. And because our society does not teach us how to be with our emotional world and integrate things, it often ends in conflict. Because what other way have we got to deal with what we're feeling? Like either that, or we get passive aggressive, right? Or we go really quiet and withdrawn. So role modeling this for our daughters, like we talk a lot about let's build our girls' self-esteem, and we tell them they should love themselves, and you know, we tell them they should do this, and we give them all this information. And you know what? That is not going to work unless you know yourself emotionally. I got told for years I should have great self-esteem, that I should love myself. And you know what? I knew I should. I always knew I should. I knew I should value myself. And I think I tried to, but I chose relationships that really clearly indicated I didn't value myself. So on an unconscious level, there was this lack of value happening. And this was all my emotional consciousness, what was happening in my emotional world. Now, for me, I've noticed that when I own my emotions and I see what's really going on, I see, wow, you know, I'm angry with this person, or I'm feeling this, not because of what they're doing, but because I have an emotional need. This is my little girl that feels insecure. She feels unloved. She feels rejected. And I can go, oh, I can do something about this. They don't need to change. In fact, if they're not here, it doesn't really matter, because I am empowered enough to do something about what I'm feeling right here and now. And when I do that, I learn to trust myself, because I'm here for me. And when I can trust myself, I can love myself. And I'm building self-esteem every single time I show up for me. Every single time I don't abandon myself out of obligation, or to stay in a relationship to be loved or to feel secure. Every single time I don't walk away from me, then I'm building my own self-esteem. I'm building how much I love myself. And that happens, right? That's not something that someone can teach me. That happens just like a plant grows, right? We plant a seed, and we might plant a seed in our backyard, and we pick a great spot for it. We put some nice soil down, we make sure it's in the sun, we water it, we fertilize it, might give it a bit of love, we might talk to it every now and then, but we have nothing to do with that plant growing. We have nothing to do with that plant blossoming beautiful flowers. We have nothing to do with that. The life force itself does the growing. The life force itself does the emergence. I have to create the environment. I have to be there, and I have to create the environment, but I am not responsible for the growing. And I have so understood that and watched that in myself and in the women I work with. I create the space, you know, I do what I need to do for me. I pay attention to my feelings. I address what I'm feeling. I take action. I do things that maybe once upon a time I didn't do, but I know that I need to do them now to have a healthy, empowered life. I stop doing things that maybe I once did before, that might have created resentment in me or might have created some other feeling that really didn't serve me. I don't put myself in a position to be hurt anymore. I do daily things that keep me emotionally feeling empowered. And it doesn't mean I always feel great. Some days I have a shit day and I'm like, okay, I feel really low today. I don't know what that's about, but I'm in a process. I'm in this emerging process with life and I'm just going to do this. I'm going to investigate. I might ring up and share with a friend, and I might get some clarity around it. I might do some writing. So every day is this beautiful emerging process. And for me to actually be in that process, then what happens is that life force itself builds my self-esteem. I naturally feel love. I naturally feel love for myself. I naturally feel love for other people because this is my natural way. My natural way is to live in this harmony. My natural way is to be integrating the feeling experiences that I have. And if I don't integrate those feeling experiences, what I've noticed is that there's Lisa over here who has feeling experiences that are like somewhere else, right? And so not all of her is there. She can try to be empowered, right? But she's never really going to feel empowered because there's bits of her missing. And she feels that. Like I remember I used to feel this sense of, I know there's something more. I know I could feel it in my body. It was like in my relationship, I knew that there was a better way to be in a relationship, but I just didn't know what it was. I didn't know what to do. It wasn't until I left that relationship that I went, oh my gosh, there's a completely different way to be in a relationship. Didn't know it, but I could feel it. And so this me is over here going, I can sense there's something more. And then there's me, that this fully integrated, empowered human being that can sit and sort of look at what's coming up and feel what's coming up and trust what's coming up and move into that moment and have a clarity and an intuitiveness about what I need to do next. And if not, be happy just being in the stillness and enjoying life and having great relationships. So the difference is on this side, I'm not connected to my emotional world. There's parts of me that I don't want to own. So I'm not whole. The difference is the emotions, right? That's all. The bridge between where we are now and our optimal self, living our optimal life, is the emotional world. And that isn't an information. It's not information. We can't learn about it. We have to experience it. We have to be in the experience of this emerging process, which is life. And so when I look at mothers and I talk to mothers, I explain how we got ourselves into this situation in the first place, and that it's not our fault, but we actually haven't had this emotion education. And I explain how when they were children, perhaps events happened, and when events happen, we step out of our wholeness because we don't really know what to do with this feeling because there's no space for us to process it. Our parents very rarely, and hopefully more parents are starting to do this, create the space for us to process our emotions. When I was a child, I didn't have that space. So I had emotions I didn't know what to do with. I took them on board and I felt like there was something wrong with me. And the event, the trauma and the feelings that came up in my body, I actually stepped away from who I was. And I thought that I needed my mum and my dad and everybody else around me to give me that love because I felt unlovable. I thought that's where I'd get it. Nobody told me to turn around and step back into myself. So I kept looking out for it. And what happens is that creates the gap. And the gap is what we feel, this gap inside that feels like it's always there, like I'm not quite good enough, I'm not worthy, it doesn't matter what I do, I can't make it through those goalposts. And the gap that's in me between me and my emotional world that I have ignored or set to the side, that gap, that manifests as so many things. And we've been taught that all these things that it manifests as are the problem, but actually the problem is the gap in us. So I show mums, I explain that to them, and then I invite them to start closing that gap. I invite them, I give them tools to feel their emotions. I give them tools, when something happens, just take a moment. What's going on in your body? How do you feel? What words can you use to express that? Can you acknowledge it and validate it? How can you connect with that inner part of you that's having the reaction? So bringing them back into this integrated space so that they can actually sit in a place where they feel okay with whatever's happening with their daughter right now. They feel accepting. And you know, if you're working with people, when you can get people to acceptance, man, doors open up. Doors, powerful doors open up. So if they can sit there and accept that this moment with their daughter is part of the emerging process of life, you know, what she's doing may be clashing with my values. What she's doing may be so anti what I'm all about, but she's doing it. And who am I to say that's not her journey? Right? If she's doing it, then that's her journey. Maybe she needs to go through that and have that experience. And I have to be in a space where I can sit there and support her and love her, give her guidance. So my daughter gets guidance. She doesn't have this totally free life where she does what she wants. But it's not rigid. It's not, there's not boundaries. There's not, this authoritarian, disciplinarian sort of way of dealing with what's happening. So for a mum to come into that place and be in her own power, and when you're operating from that place, what happens is you get intuitive solutions, because in your innate wisdom, there are things that you know that you don't value yourself because our society doesn't value that. Our patriarchal society hasn't valued that intuitiveness, that softness, that thing you can't explain. Our patriarchal society has been about, I can prove this and I've got data, therefore it's got to work. But I'm suggesting now, let's not throw that out, because those things are really helpful and they're really good. But let's also bring in this feminine, they call it the divine feminine. I often don't use those words because I think sometimes we've had a bit of a spiritual movement, and sometimes I think that can be quite ungrounded. For me, I want my mums to be able to walk away from having a conversation with me and be able to do something right here and now. It's not about, doing things out in the ethers. You're in a human body and you need to be able to use this right here, right now, because your daughter is going through stuff. And if you can't do that, then what good is the information that you've got? So for me, bringing mums back into this place of power, I'm allowing this moment to be what it is. And in that place, I often get the next move. Like I just go, oh, actually what I feel I need to do, I need to get her a job, right? This is my before Christmas. I have one of these like, what am I going to do about this thing that's happening? I'm just sitting in it. Because I'm sitting in my power, the outcomes I get are much better because I'm not reacting. I'm not trying to make things happen from a position of powerlessness. I'm actually sitting in a more empowered spot. So the movement forward has a much better trajectory. And I surprised myself. I had one mum that said to me, she was struggling getting her daughter on the bus every day. And she was like, every day she was late and some days she missed school. And she said, and I could feel it moving towards a power struggle. My daughter started to put her hands on her hips and wouldn't. And she said, and I thought, oh, I'm not going to go to the power struggle. So she said, I just sat back and I just listened to myself. And I just sort of went, okay, let's just sit back with this. And she said, so what I did is I said to my daughter, would you like me to plait your hair before school every day? And the daughter said, yeah, that'd be great. So every morning the mum got ready. She plaited her hair 15 minutes before the bus came, plaited the hair, and the daughter and her walked out the door every morning and they never missed another bus. So that is the sort of thing that we want to encourage women to see, that they all have this innate wisdom. We have it in us. It's natural. It's natural, whether or not we're mothers. And in fact, men have it too. We all have it. It is our natural way. And the way we tap into it is through our emotional world, from understanding our emotions and really being able to integrate what we're feeling and learning to be comfortable with it, which is where we need the tools. There are so many different ways and things that we can do when we feel big emotion. But it's that attitude of, I'm in an emerging process. I'm in this life process. I'm just going to emerge with this and I'm going to trust this. And what happens is there is a flow that starts to happen and there's a knowing that starts to happen. And it really does end up making you feel so much more confident. No more second guessing, no more of those, the self-talk where you're just not quite good enough and you think, I should be able to fix this because I'm such a capable woman. I can do all this other stuff. Why can't I do this? None of that. Because you're in a process with your daughter and she feels safe. She feels loved, she feels seen, she feels heard, she feels understood. And it's probably quite rare that she's going to be able to find that in her world out there. So when we offer it, that is her safe space. And that creates this beautiful, deep connection of cohesion, which really is the best influence on her that she can possibly have. So, how's that, Jackie?
Wonderful. Perfect timing too, Lisa. Thank you. We
You're
talked
welcome.
about that window. I think you've offered us so much of a great introduction to the importance of coming into, I mean, you use the words emotionally safe harbour and a cohesion with self. And I guess many of us would know that also is a sense of authenticity. When we are genuinely connected with who we are, mind, body, and emotions, we're in a much better place to be receiving, to be seeing in the moment who the other is. And I think as mental health professionals, we're all really trained in that very person-centered way of starting. And I think when any of us get stressed or overwhelmed or too much in our head, we are disconnected from our emotional self. And as soon as that happens, we can't ever see and be with another. And so helping mothers and parents to be able to do that and see that can't not improve their relationships and an ability to parent their boys and their girls, but particularly their girls in the way that you presented today. So it's so beautiful and really nice to hear your take on that too. This is an opportunity now to ask some questions. So if you wanted to ask a question of Lisa, either put your hand up or pop something in the chat and I can read it out for her. If you're still thinking about a question, maybe we'll start with, I can start us off. One of the things that I was aware of as you were talking is resistance. And working with, as a school counsellor for many years and another 15 years in private practice after that, so many parents would bring in, in this context, mothers would bring in daughters or would ring me and say, you really need to help her, she's really struggling. And I could recognise that there was an opportunity for mum maybe to also do some change, but there was a whole lot of resistance to that. It was like, oh, that's all very well, but you just need to talk to her. She's just off the rails. What would you say to mental health professionals who might be in that situation? How can you engage mums to do their own work and to look at their part in all of this?
Yeah. One of the things that's really helped me working with people is reminding myself I don't have to fix anybody. I don't have to change anybody. That's not my job. But I know that there is a force that helps to change people if I open up the space for that. So my approach to a mother that would have that, would come with that is I would probably just sit with her and I would just really validate her, like, wow, it's really frustrating, isn't it, when you have a daughter that does all these things and you can't control it. And so for me, it would just be about giving her a space to be seen and heard and understood. Because what happens is the emotional resistance, it's sort of like, you can watch it sometimes. It's like the emotional charge when you start to really hear somebody and validate them in where they're at right now, because whether or not I agree, that's what they're feeling. And like, why wouldn't they be? Like, it's a tough world out there and there's a lot of pressure on mum. So it's like just being there and creating that space and being heard, that often you'll find that there's a softening. And when there's a softening, that's the opportunity then to maybe recommend, or sometimes I say, I found that when I started to look at some of the words I was using, it made a big difference. So I always use my experience because it's almost like I'm the medium for their pain and their everything. And I find even in my book, I wrote from me because I use me as like that person that's experiencing it, and it's not quite as confronting for people. And I think that it's true, Jackie, and like I'm sure all you guys have, you've probably worked with people. If somebody does not want to shift out of that victimhood attitude where it's everybody else's fault, it's not mine, or it's them, it's not me, there isn't a lot you can do, And for me, I choose not to work with people like that because that is a waste of my heartbeats. And I luckily have the position where I can do that. When people are ready to work on themselves and they're willing, that's really, they have to be willing, they have to be ready. And I can't change that for anything. If I try to change that, or if I try to convince them otherwise, then I get in a dynamic. I get in a dynamic where I end up burnt out. I end up feeling crappy about myself. I feel resentful because maybe I've given them some advice and they've taken it off and then they haven't applied it. You know, like I start all these different dynamics. So for me, it's just about being in this moment. The more I can be in this moment, that I find that I sort of feel what has to happen next. And it's always just creating that space. Like, honestly, that's one of the biggest things. You guys would know that. It's just like having people being heard. Like, really, in our society, we're not emotionally heard. You know, so to offer someone that space is such a gift. You know, like, oh my gosh, they hear me, they know what I'm going through.
It's such an important thing to be offering. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions that they would like to put to Lisa at this point? Just either give us a wave, I'll get you to unmute or write something in the chat. Maybe you're thinking about a question and you'd like to ask one a little bit later on today as well. Okay, so we've got a question from Anna here, and I'll read this out since you've put that in the chat there. Thank you. I'm in the midst of a struggle with my 12-year-old daughter around screen time. I put time restrictions on her device because she's a tendency to get buried in games. I had thought instilling a process of going outside and setting boundaries might be helpful in this. I grew up with few boundaries and really craved them, but she's really wanting the restrictions taken off. And I'm hearing you say to remove boundaries. What should we do?
That's a great question. So I didn't say remove boundaries, right? So sometimes you have to, like, boundaries is a hard thing. Like, because what I find is the more I know myself emotionally, I don't need boundaries because I don't set myself up to be hurt. So for me, I don't even think about boundaries anymore because I just don't end up needing them. With my daughter, I might have, like, I have certain things. I'll allow her to go out, for example, but she can't be out after dark. So that's a boundary, right? That's a healthy thing. Now, with screen time, we're in a really tricky situation. We can't take that. People go, just take the phones off them. You can't do that, right? Because you do something like that and you're going to get more of what you don't want. Plus, for me, remembering that the most important thing is the connection that you have with your daughter. That is more important than anything. For me, there have been things that I've just sort of sat with, because the most important thing is that we are connected, that we trust each other. And I always have that first and foremost in my mind. If I don't keep that connection with her, if I don't keep that emotional safety with her when she's 11 and 12, and when she's 15, I've lost it completely. So everything I do is about making sure that I'm connected with her. So if I went in there and I said, right, this is going to happen, we're going to do this, there's no connection, I'm creating division. So maybe hold it in your head, Anna, I think it was, hold it in your head that when you do the next thing, it's like, is this creating more connection? Is this creating more unity? Or is it going to create division? If it's going to create division, I need to come back to myself and I need to wait to find a better way of being with this. Now, things that I've done is I've noticed that my daughter's on the screen too. Like I said, this is what everybody does. And if you deny them that, how do they function in society? How do they talk to their friends? Like, it's just so insidious and it's not good. Ultimately, we would love them to choose to put the phones down. And until they do that, we really can't make them do that. But what we can do is encourage them, like you said, take them outside. So I said to my daughter, like, there was something, I can't remember what it was, she wanted something. I said, that's really great, let's do that. And what would really help that is let's make sure we have a routine every day where we spend 2 hours off our phone and we make sure we're in bed by 10. Oh, Mum, I can't do that. And I go, well, I'm going to do it too. Or, like I said, well, I'm working. So maybe in those 2 hours, you could do this, this, and this. Or if you're at school, do this. Or when you come home, let's go for a walk together and we'll leave our phones. So I'm looking for little things all the time that pull her towards me and away from that. And I'm not forcing it, but I'm always looking for those opportunities. And I'm always thinking this is about my connection with her, like going in there. She's on her screen. I often go in there and I just sit with her and say, oh, who are you talking to? What are you up to? And we have a chat and I'll chat to her friends. Like, I'm just looking all the time, not all the time, but I'm looking for ways to keep connecting with her. I'm thinking of how can I keep building this connection? How can I do this? I want her off the screen times, and I allow my intuition to show me a way forward. And often things will come up. you know, like there might be something, oh, that's a great idea, I'm going to do that, you know. And so like even me thinking she needs a job, right, that's going to get her over the holidays, because I was thinking I don't want her on the screen all the holidays. Okay, she needs a job. That just popped into my head. So asked my local hairdresser, you know, you look really busy. She ended up working for the holidays. It was the best thing. She had money. She was off her phone for 5 hours every day. She felt great about herself because she was actually out and working. And I never would have thought about that before. So I'm just saying that you don't necessarily have to enforce and be strict and do that to get the solutions that you want, that there are other ways to get the solutions that you want. And if you keep in mind that what our intention is always to do is to be in the emerging process with our daughter and to deepen the connection that we have, and that our next step should always be with that in mind, then you'll find that you'll probably be more likely to get to the solutions that you want.
Great response. Thanks so much, Lisa. And there's a question here from Bianca. She missed the beginning. What was the name of your book?
The Emotionally Powerful Mother.
Wonderful.
So I did put the link to my website in the chat box, and there's a section of that I've pulled out as a mini book, which is a free download. So please go and download it. You know, I'd love, and give me some feedback. I'd love you to read it. And it's a lot of what I've spoken about today. And you can just grab that for free and look over it.
Great. And I'll put that in the chat again now so people can get access to that if you missed it at the start. Thank you so much for that. And there'll be an opportunity to talk to Lisa, possibly in one of the breakout rooms that I'm just about to set up. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to invite you into a group of 2 to 3 other people, and or 3 or 4 other people. And just for about 10 minutes, I'd love you to turn your cameras on if you can, and just have a bit of a reflection with one another about how this presentation today will impact either your relationship with your daughters, should you have any, or the children, young women that you're working with, and or their mothers as well. So what can you take away from today, even just one small thing that might make an impact in the work or in the life that you're living at the moment? So we'll just have 10 minutes for that. You'll get a 1-minute warning. You can just stay until the end. You'll automatically come back here when that 10 minutes is up. And then we'll have a bit of a reflection on that, and then move into some of our upcoming events, and we'll do a quiz and a giveaway at the end. And then I'll also give you the option of a PD certificate should you want that for the hour today. So I'll invite you into those rooms now, and I'll see you in 10 minutes. Is there anything that you discussed in your group now that you'd like to share with all of us? Anything that was important that you take away from today? Melissa, did you want to share something? Oh, Annalise, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I was just leaving space first. So we had Anna and Lisa and myself, and I think the main thing that for myself that came out of the talk was bringing everything back to self, remembering that our daughters also are self, and though we can be each other's companions, we're not in control of them, we're not responsible for them, or rather it's loosening those words, what responsible is, what loving them is, what guidance is, all of those words. I think as soon as they hit teenagerdom, it's nearly like you've got to throw out all the definitions that were used before and create and discover a whole new dictionary of what it is to be a mum. And that's an exciting process. So yeah, enjoy.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for sharing that. Fantastic.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts or reflections that came out of your group discussions just now you'd like to share with us? Okay. If you did have any final questions that you wanted to pop into the chat, feel free to do that. And you can see the links there if you'd like to copy and paste those, and I'll send them around via email afterwards as well. If you wanted to follow up on any of this work and obviously be in contact with Lisa as well, that's a way to reach her there. A couple of things that I'd like to do before we finish up with the quiz today and the opportunity, should you want to take that, of giving yourself a PD certificate. Just wanted to share a couple of things and also give you notice of some free things we've got coming up, and also some a giveaway for today, which I'm really excited to share with you. So I'd like to just pop that back up, And we've had a good opportunity to connect in now with a couple of other people, which is always lovely. We've got another free information evening coming up for the graduate certificate in play and art therapy. It's a 200-hour online course. I'm starting the next one in March. That program is completely booked, but our next intake will be in July. So if you're interested, or if you know others who might be interested in a graduate certificate in play and art therapy, you can come along to that free information evening, and I'll be talking all about it then. We've also got a fabulous therapeutic storytelling workshop coming up on the 1st and 2nd of March. These often book out these 10-person workshops. So it's a really small group, and over 2 mornings, you get a deep dive into how to source and how to create actually a great framework for writing your own therapeutic story for clients. It's a really popular workshop and I highly recommend it. Kim Billington, our fabulous narrative therapist, is running a book club this year. So it's going to be starting on the 7th of March, once a month for 6 months. And that's the book that you get posted to when you book that. It's a small group, again, of like-minded people who review a chapter of a book and relate it to their clinical casework. So it's a great way of learning about and being able to apply narrative therapy into practice. And Kim's a fantastic facilitator. I've also got some art therapy groups coming up. I've got one starting on the 3rd of March. And that's a 5-week online group for 2 hours. And our next free one of these, our holding space, is going to be about Reiki. So if you're interested in massage generally or healing without touching necessarily, this is a really great introduction to what it is. And the facilitator is also going to lead us through a little mindfulness meditation, so you get something out of it as well in that session. Thank you all so much for being here today. Thank you for being present. Thank you for your questions and your participation. And thank you especially the radiant Lisa Jayne and the beautiful sharing that you've done with us today.
Thanks, Jackie. And thanks, everyone. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for your support.
Pleasure. See you all next time. Bye now.